Paula asked a question about Bible study. She had been watching our series, How to Study the Bible, which is on YouTube, and I would encourage you to get that and watch through that. There's 5 or 6 or 7 series on how to study the Bible in various parts of the Bible, the prophecy of the Bible, the history of the Bible, the doctrine of the Bible. How do you study those passages? Well, Paula has a question about that, and the question is, when using a Strong's Concordance, how do you know which definition of the word is the correct word? Now, in her expanded question, what Paula says or notes is, when you begin to do word studies, which I think is foundational and primary to studying the Word of God, when you begin to do word studies using a Strong's Concordance, what you find out is that particular Greek word is almost always translated in a number of different ways. And so Paula's question is a good one. You're using Strong's Concordance and you look it up and you say, well, here it's translated such and such, but over there it's such and such. How do I know what to go with? Well, there's a couple of things that I would say, and one, this is not perfectly in harmony here, but go with, give a lean benefit of the doubt to the majority usage and say, why is it used, 35 times this way and only 5 or 6 times this way? I want to lean toward the majority. Now, there may be very legitimate reasons why it's not, and I want to talk about that. And the first thing you can do, and this takes an interlinear to do rather than a Strong's Concordance, and there are 3 tools I suggest when studying the Bible, and these are the 3 tools that 90% of my preaching comes from these 3 tools alone. One is a King James Version of the Bible. I say the King James Version of the Bible because so many resources are built upon the King James. I happen to use a Schofield, by the way, and we have some 100th anniversary Schofield editions available, but that's another story, another advertisement. You need a King James Version of the Bible. It's the most literal, and the tools like Strong's are going to be built upon the King James. Now, second thing you need is a Strong's Concordance to look these words up, and the third thing you need is an interlinear. You'll have to get the Newberry interlinear or an interlinear based upon the majority text, the Textus Receptus that the King James is built upon, and they're hard to find, I'll warn you, but a good interlinear will go along with it. Now, with an interlinear, you can then check the form and the tense of the word. This especially makes a difference in Hebrew, but also does in Greek, that the form or the tense of the word can shift the meaning of that word. And if you have an electronic tool to look it up, you can look up every time that particular word is used in that form. And what you may find is a great deal of consistency that takes away the guesswork that is there in doing a word search. It's called morphology, looking up the morphology of a word. That is, how has that word been formed in its tenses? For example, is it a second person plural future, or is it an aorist indicative, or what may it be? What form? So that's the first thing that I would do to try to figure out all these definitions in Strong's. Which one am I going to use? I'm going to narrow it down to the form and tense. The second thing I would do is I would follow Strong's back to the root word. For example, Strong's word number 4043. If you look up 4043, it'll say this word comes from 4012 and 3961. 2 words put together. I want to know, what does the root actually say? And I would study then that first one. If it has sometimes it may just have 1 root. Sometimes it may have 2 if it has a prefix. If it has a prefix, learn over time what those prefixes mean. I often speak of these prefixes in my preaching. Prefixes like kata, prefixes like para, to come alongside. Kata is one that by itself just means according to, but together with a word, it expands that word to the ultimate sense of that word. It's a strong exaggeration even of that word. So come to understand, hey, if I've got para, I'm coming alongside something. If I've got kata, I'm going all the way to the fullest extent of this word. And you begin to learn some of these. Ek, if I've got ek, I know it's coming out of this. And learn those prefixes over time. That'll just take a lot of time to do. But then not only study the meaning of the prefixes, study then the various uses of the root word. Often, as you're going through this, it's not a quick process, but as you're going through this, you can say, oh, I understand now how this word, this translation of Strong's, and this translation of Strong's, that seem, at first glance, they seem to be so opposite, but now I can see that using the root and how the root comes in its various forms, these begin to make sense and they begin to shine together. So follow those root words. And then, as you're looking at that, if you're still stuck, or you want to put this on even ahead of time, as you're looking at the usage, look for times when that particular author used it first. Here it's got 5 or 6 definitions, but you may find that Paul always used it in this sense. And if you can't find for the author, look for the genre. That is, in the doctrinal books, epistles, it's always used in this way, whereas in a historical book, it may be used in another sense, and that will help you. And then, of course, goes without saying almost, look to see not only what the King James Version has done, but look in Young's literal translation. It's typically a very good translation, and see what Young's has done. In all of that. The Blue Mule here also says it's always good to have a talking mule. And the Blue Mule says, is the Thompson Chain Reference Bible a good Bible along with the Schofield? And I would say, yes, it's very much a good Bible. One of these days, I'm going to get around to, first of all, showing how to use the reference system in the Schofield Study Bible. In fact, if you look on it, it says the Old Schofield Study System. There is a system, and most of us miss that. We just happen to look at the bottom and see what the note says, or we look at a particular reference in the column. But I think, first of all, in Schofield, the reference column has a system, and learning to use that system is very helpful. In fact, often the references there in the center column is one of the greatest benefits to the Schofield Study Bible. Now, Thompson Chain Reference has an even more expanded chain reference, a reference system that helps tremendously in coming along and putting these scriptures together and seeing how they come together, how they operate, how they work, to find the meaning of that. So Thompson Chain Reference is another very good option to use in that. So excellent question. Thank you, Paula, for sending that in advance, and appreciate you listening in this morning as well.